What if the people who were supposed to build your future were the same people slowly destroying it? What if the home that should protect you became the very place where your dreams were buried before they even had a chance to grow? And what if every single day of your childhood was not about learning, not about love, not about becoming something greater, but about surviving, obeying, and producing value like you were never a child but only a tool? Stay with this story, because what you are about to hear is not just painful, it is real, and before the end of this journey, you will understand how one boy lost everything before he even understood what life was, and how he fought against a system designed to keep him small, silent, and useful. This is the story of Daniel, and this story might change how you see family forever. Daniel was born into a house where silence was safer than speaking and obedience was more important than understanding, and from the very beginning, his life followed a pattern that he never chose but was forced to accept because in that home, children were not guided, they were controlled, and they were not raised to grow, they were raised to serve. His father believed that children existed to bring wealth into the family, and his mother believed that suffering early would make them strong later, and between those two beliefs, Daniel's childhood slowly disappeared before it even began. But what Daniel did not know at the time was that something very small, something almost invisible, was already growing inside him, and that small thing would one day challenge everything his parents believed. Every morning before the sun had fully risen, Daniel was already awake carrying loads that bent his small body under pressure, and while other children walked to school holding books, he walked to the market holding responsibilities far beyond his age, and even though he tried not to compare himself, the difference was impossible to ignore. He did not understand why his life felt heavier than others, but he could feel it deep inside him, like something was missing that he could not name. And one day, that feeling would turn into a question, and that question would become dangerous. As Daniel grew older, he began to ask himself why he was not allowed to go to school, and that simple question, which would be normal in any other home, became a problem in his own, because the moment he asked it out loud, everything changed. His father's reaction was immediate and harsh, and instead of an answer, Daniel received punishment, and instead of understanding, he received fear. From that day forward, he learned that curiosity had consequences. But even fear has limits, and Daniel was slowly reaching his. One afternoon, while passing near the village school, Daniel heard something that stopped him completely, and it was not a shout, not an order, but a calm voice explaining something he had never heard before, and without realizing it, he stood still and listened. That moment lasted only a few minutes, but it planted something powerful in his mind. And sometimes, all it takes is one moment to begin a quiet rebellion. When his father discovered that Daniel had delayed near the school, the punishment was not just physical, it was meant to break something inside him, and as Daniel lay on the ground that night, he realized something important, something that would stay with him forever. He realized that his pain was not an accident, it was part of a system. And once you see the system, you can never unsee it. Daniel began to teach himself in silence, and every small piece of knowledge he gained felt like a step toward freedom, and even though he had no teacher, no books, and no support, he refused to stop. He wrote letters in the dust, he memorized sounds, he observed everything, and slowly, his mind began to expand beyond the limits of his environment. But living two lives always comes with a risk, and Daniel was getting closer to being discovered. In the middle of a busy market day, someone finally saw Daniel not as a worker, not as a tool, but as a human being, and that person was an old man who chose to speak with kindness instead of control. The conversation was simple, but its impact was deep. For the first time, someone told Daniel that his life could be different. And sometimes, one voice is enough to challenge a lifetime of lies. Daniel now faced a new kind of struggle, one that was not outside but inside, because part of him still feared his parents, while another part wanted freedom more than anything else. This internal battle became stronger every day. And eventually, every internal battle demands a decision. One night, after another punishment, something inside Daniel finally reached its limit, and instead of accepting his situation, he began to imagine leaving, not as a dream, but as a real possibility. That night, he did not sleep. That night, he changed. Because once the idea of freedom enters your mind, it never leaves. Before sunrise, Daniel walked away from everything he had ever known, and each step felt both terrifying and necessary, and even though he had no clear plan, he had something stronger than fear. He had a reason. If you are still here listening to Daniel's story, then you already understand that this is more than just a story, and what comes next will show you whether leaving was enough, or if the world outside was just as unforgiving. Daniel struggles in a new town, faces hunger, rejection, and loneliness, but slowly finds opportunity, meets people who value education, begins night classes, learns discipline, builds confidence, and starts transforming his identity. But freedom without direction can be just another form of struggle. And just when things started to improve, something unexpected happened. He thought the hardest part was over, but he was wrong. Daniel begins to succeed, gains education, builds purpose, starts helping others, and begins healing emotionally. Daniel returns home not for revenge but for closure, and standing in front of his past, he realizes that he is no longer the same person, and more importantly, he no longer belongs to that system. He chooses to become a voice for others. So now ask yourself, what kind of environment are you building around you, and are you raising dreams or destroying them? Because the truth is, the price of a dark home is not just paid by the child, it is paid by the future. And if this story made you feel something, then share it, because someone out there might still be living this reality, waiting for a reason to believe that escape is possible. Please like, subscribe and share for more interesting stories. Thank you for watching.